discussion sponsored by SASA. We're here with Dr. Merilee Grindle to discuss her book. Um, and just before we get started, I'm going to put up a slideshow and just to introduce SASA and what we're about. And yeah, so let's do that. All right, so we are here to discuss In the Shadow of Quetzalcoatl. Did I say that right?
Yes, Quetzalcoatl.
Quetzalcoatl. Okay.
I think it's a lovely word.
I love it too. I love it too. Written by Dr. Merilee Grindle. And SASA is short for Save Ancient Studies Alliance, and we work to promote the study of the ancient world and engagement with our human deeper pasts. So, by building a grassroots movement through outreach, collaboration, accessibility, and public scholarship, we work toward our goal of inspiring a wide, inclusive community of scholars, learners, and students. And one of my favorite ways of doing this is through the book clubs. I absolutely love these. So you can find SASA on just about every major social media platform. So please feel free to check us out there and follow us there for more updates and ways that you can help support SASA. Our live event protocol is just, be kind and respectful, listen and ask thoughtful questions. For everybody watching on our live platforms, feel free to post questions in the chat and we will answer them. We do plan to have a Q&A session at the end of the book club meeting. So if you have any questions that come up while Dr. Grindle and I are discussing her book, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we would love to answer those at the end. So our live events are live streamed on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and they are recorded and archived. So if you don't get to watch the full thing, you can come back and watch it later. You can become a recurring donor. So you can do a monthly donation. Here is our QR code to do that, or you can do a one-time donation if you want to, just to help support SASA and our mission to bring awareness to ancient studies. All right, and so that's it. So we're ready to go ahead and get started. Checking out your amazing book. Let me turn that off. There we go. All right, so I pushed the wrong button. Here it is. This is your book, In the Shadow of Quetzalcoatl. And when does it officially come out?
It came out officially last Tuesday, so on November 7th. So it is available both in hardcover and on the God, I knew this would happen. The
bookstore sites.
The one you see on your screen.
Oh, ebook.
Yeah, it's an ebook.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So you can find the book and purchase the book through the QR code listed on the screen. And so I want to get started. Just a little bit of information, a little bit of background on you. What is your background and what drew you to this topic?
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be with you and delighted to have a chance to talk about my new book. I want to say that I think the mission of SASA is an incredibly important one. I've been witnessing the decline of the humanities for a few years now, and it is, I think, a tragedy of scholarship and learning. So I applaud what you are doing, and I think we all just have to hang in there and keep pushing, and eventually the world will get back to honoring what you do and what you know about. I'm actually a political scientist. I had a wonderful career. I was at the Kennedy School at Harvard for many, many years. Loved everything I did. I have retired and gotten involved in other things. And one of the things is this project about Zelia. I was working on another project when I came across her name, and uh, didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. But then when I finished the other project, I started looking around for a new project. I started following up. This really is a tale of a kind of boring tale of just one thing led to another, but that's what happened.
Yeah.
I started searching on the internet to find out anything I could about her. I found out that there was a Zelia Nuttall Society. This must have been back in 2016, 2017. At the time, it had 18 members, which I thought was interesting. I found out that a person named Ross Parmenter back in the 1960s had begun doing research on Zelia Nuttall. And he was the uh, music critic for the New York Times. And for some reason, he got very, very interested in archaeology in Mexico. He got very interested in the Aztecs. He, through that, got very interested in Zelia Nuttall. And through the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, he did an enormous amount of research to find out more about her. In the end, he wrote a 3-volume manuscript about her. There are, I discovered, 3 copies of this manuscript, one at Harvard.
Only
One
3?
yes, only 3. One
Wow.
at Harvard, one at Tulane, and one at Berkeley. And so I sat down and just started working my way through this. I was in a sense, I was blown away by what he had done, because go back to the 1960s and 70s and even the 80s. How did people do research? Well, if they wanted to find out about something, they wrote letters, they traveled. He would sit down and type out long letters to people who had known her, because she died in 1933. So in the 60s and 70s, there were still people alive who had known her. He would type them out, send them through the mail, wait for a month or so until he got the reply back, and then used that to incorporate into the biography he was writing. Um, it turned out that what he wrote was over 1,600 pages long, and at the time, no one was particularly interested in publishing it, and he was uninterested in shortening it. So there you are. But he had done a remarkable amount of work, and some of the work I did was actually just following in his footsteps to find the archives that he had found and to read them for myself and pick up things that maybe he or had not been as interested in. So that's how I got started. There was a wonderful moment when I discovered that he left his boxes of letters and materials to the Latin American Library at Tulane, and over 100 boxes, and about 12 to 15 of those boxes had to do with Zelia. So I was able to go back and see the original letters and a lot of the material that he had put together, and it was fascinating. So that's how I got started. One thing led to another.
Wow. That is remarkable. So just that one person would be so fascinated by Zelia that they dedicate their whole lives to
Exactly.
learning more about her. Like, did you ever discover what exactly, like, why he wanted to do this? Or
he had traveled a number of times to Mexico. I think he just became, I mean, Mexico is just a incredibly rich, interesting place. And it's not hard to understand how you just get, you just get soaked into it. And
Yeah.
he became very, as I say, in the archaeology. And through that, heard about her somehow, and you know, from there. But it was very sweet. In one of his letters, some of his letters, he started referring to her as my girlfriend, which I thought was very nice.
That is funny. Oh wow, that's incredible. So why do you think we don't know more about Zelia? Because I had never heard of her, and I've taken several history classes from the Mesoamerica era, or in that um, study subject, and I've never heard of her. So why do you think we don't know more about her? 'Cause
There's
she made so many contributions.
I imagine there's a number of reasons, but I would say the primary reason had to do with the institutionalization, the professionalization of the discipline, that really gained momentum in the 1920s and 1930s. And I think that cast the earlier generation as a generation of amateurs that,
Mm,
in a sense, we who have credentials, we who have, been to university and gotten degrees and can show that we are anthropologists, we are archaeologists. I think it caused them to look back on what they had been doing, and kind of, well, but, um, some stuff maybe, but really just amateurs.
I see.
And I think as academics, we do have a tendency to forget our ancestors, to think that we've just discovered the world anew. And so I think there are a number of things, but more than anything, I think it was the professionalization of the discipline. Um, and that, in fact, owes much to one of her very good friends, Franz Boas, who committed his life to making sure that anthropology became a discipline with a canon of knowledge that people were trained in, and that people got certificates, PhDs,
Mhm.
saying, this, and this, and therefore you can go out and actually be an anthropologist or actually be an archaeologist. So I do think that it's that professionalization, institutionalization that kind of overwhelmed the earlier generation.
That is really fascinating. And something that I don't think I ever would have like put two and two together quite like that, but that makes sense.
Well, when you think about it, once anthropology moved into universities as a department, and people within departments basically said, we're the ones who get to decide whether you get to be an archaeologist or an anthropologist. And then the funding organizations started channeling their money through through the universities and the department. It became very, very difficult to be an independent scholar, like she was.
Yeah. And that's trickled on to today. Like you
Yeah.
can't if you don't, have the credentials and the education backing up your train of thought, then you're not really given any credibility. So like I mean I yeah, it's funny how that kind of worked out that way, that
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
would be such a trailblazer for anthropology, but then not recognized as, legitimate
Yeah.
because of laying the groundwork for
Yeah.
the discipline. That's
Yeah. And part of it could have been, she was a woman. She was known to be kind of a difficult woman.
I was gonna say she ruffles some feathers.
So yes, so there are other things that went into that, but in the end, other people stepped in ahead of her, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, so you mentioned so many things in this book, historical wise, like just like all the many directions that you could have taken this book, or all the things that you could have woven in alongside what you did. Like, um, how did you decide what to include, and how long did it take you to really figure out what you wanted to tell? Like how did that story progression go for you?
Well, I'll start with the second. It took me a long time. I started out, thinking, oh, here's a forgotten woman, here's a difficult woman. That would make an interesting story. And I was given to understand by people who know the market that that's not enough. There's lots of forgotten women. There's lots of difficult women, or women who are thought to be difficult, I should say
Mhm.
that. And so over time, as I became more and more interested in the links between her life and the times in which she led. And eventually, that was reflected in the idea of the arc of her life that intersected at various points with really interesting things happening, like late 19th century fascination um, with science, and particularly with natural science in the wake of Charles Darwin.
Mhm.
Um, the idea that okay, so you're interested in something we might call ethnology or archaeology or linguistics or something like that, but there's no departments in universities, there's no place you can go to get a credential. So what do? Well, you look for a mentor, you look for a network, and that was kind of the beginning of anthropology. She was able to make connections with a number of the kind of fathers of anthropology, particularly Frederick Ward Putnam at
Mhm.
the Peabody Museum. He, in a sense, adopted her and became her mentor. Um, Ushered her into the meetings of the associations, which were the early homes for people who wanted to be anthropologists and archaeologists. And then there was, at the same time, there was this accumulation of great wealth in the United States in the years after the Civil War that, um, you know, um, channeled into the Gilded Age, when elites in the United States wanted to show their cultural credentials, and so they started investing in and building museums and opera houses and botanical gardens. And at the same time, there was the rise of the what we would consider to be our modern cities with the infrastructure and whatnot. So all of these things kind of came together. And what I tried to do in the book is show, how she found a mentor, how she got involved in the networks, how she became attached to museums, how the museums gave way to university departments. And then by the early 20th century, this kind of discussion across countries about who owns history. And so there's this international kind of tug of war of things happening in the United States and very similar things happening in Mexico about who gets to decide about origin myths and origin stories and things like that. So, and then there's a revolution, and how did that affect a revolution in Mexico, and how did that affect her life? So it's kind of an arc of her life, as reflected in the emergence of anthropology, but also that as a reflection of some very, very significant changes going on in the late 19th and early 20th century. And, moving into the 1920s with the professionalization of the discipline, and her arc is going down at that point.
Mhm.
So in a way, she rode a wave of history, but the wave in a sense
Yeah.
left her behind. What I loved about her is she just fought back. She said, "You're not going to forget me. I did this, I did that. Don't you dare not cite me in your work." And she was remarkable in her last 15 years. Just fighting back. And I really admire, and in the end, I just really admired that she just insisted on herself.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the things that I noted too, is just how she stood up for herself in during a time when women were probably some of the most it was probably one of the most suppressive times for women in a lot of ways, and she was just like, "No, you're not. I'm going to go to this, special historical meeting with all
Mhm.
these great men who are, fabulous in this subject or discipline, and I'm gonna have a seat at the table, and you're not gonna take that away. Oh, and I'm gonna write this paper, and you're not gonna cite it without crediting me." I just love that when you wrote that her friend had written some paper and some presentation or something on her work, and then he didn't credit her, and that was like the end of their friendship. That was the end. She was like,
Yeah,
"No, you're not gonna not credit me. Like we're over. I'm not helping
yeah,
you anymore."
yeah,
I was like, "Wow, that's."
yeah. No, she was, and I think she had to overcome as a young woman. She had to overcome a lot of, you know, a sense of what society was telling her her role was. And but I also think the fact that she came from an elite background helped her assert herself, because she was, as you would imagine, a Victorian woman who was imperious, at a
Mhm.
certain level. She knew where she stood in the social hierarchy, and she wasn't afraid to tell you, you know, what your role was.
Yeah, and I really liked too that she was a divorced woman with a child, and she did not let that slow her down either, and didn't take any crap from anybody about it either. And I love that. Just what a remarkable woman
Yeah.
in a non-remarkable time for women.
Well, I wish I knew more about her marriage and her divorce. There was just very, very little to go on, but it happened, uh, with scarcely 2 years into the marriage. She was suing for separation and then divorce. It took 8 years, but and she insisted on taking back her maiden name. She
Hmm.
insisted that her daughter be raised with her maiden name. So very, very interesting. Yeah, for the time.
Very,
Yeah,
very forward thinking.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the fact that she was raised to be Catholic, in an elite household. So that's pretty gutsy, I guess.
Yeah, there's just so much gutsiness with her and on so many different levels. And yeah, it's remarkable to me that somebody like her, it just isn't like a cornerstone of like women's history, I
Mm.
guess. Just everything that she accomplished, like the things that she faced, just like her story. I don't. Yeah, I'm shocked that I haven't heard of her before, and I'm a little upset. I haven't heard of her before because she's so inspirational. So
Well, I have to say there is the Zelia Nuttall Society still lives. So
I'm gonna look that up. I might be the 19th member. I might become the 19th member. So, are there any topics that you stumbled on during your research of her that you really didn't get a chance to explore in the book, or you wanted to and you just couldn't figure out how to fit it in, and maybe you plan to explore it in the future, or what are the
Um,
key?
there were lots I could do. What I loved about doing the research was not only finding out about her, but realizing that I had to tell a bigger story. So, for example, she was born in 1857 in San Francisco. And so, well, what was San Francisco like in the 1850s? And so I had to take myself, you know, away from Zelia to find out about, as much as I could about California and San Francisco and the era of the gold rush, and I just found that fascinating. What was going on in Mexico in the 1910s or in the 1890s? That I just found that absolutely fascinating. What I found most frustrating is that I couldn't find out more about her. She was a member of a network of very prominent people. And she wrote letters to, and Phoebe Hearst, who was the mother of William Randolph Hearst, the press baron. She was the richest woman in America, one of the richest people in America in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And she was a good friend of Zelia. So there were letters back and forth. Um, we have a number of letters from Zelia because these people saved the correspondence. We have very few letters to Zelia because they were destroyed after she died, or dispersed, or burned, or whatever. So we often there's just half the story. And even if I had that, there was a part of her, that her personal life, that she really kept hidden, and I found that, I would love to have been able to crack that. But uh, as far as I can tell, there's just that information is just not there. I would have loved to have known about the dress she wore to the coronation of Nicholas II. I would have loved to know. She played the piano. She sang. What kind of music did she like? What what kind of jokes did she like to tell? I just would have liked to know more about her interior, her personal life,
Mhm.
than is available. And I suppose, for SASA members, that's a daily frustration. You can only know so much about the past. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, unfortunately, it happens where you often find out like what somebody did or what they contributed to, but we rarely know about the actual person and how
right,
they lived, and like what was their real motivation. Like we can, extrapolate what her motivations could have been, but at the end of the day, it's like what really was it? Like it could have been
yeah,
something simple, like I don't know, someone gave her a funny look one day and she was like, they're gonna do that again. It could have been something simple like that, but we
yeah,
just don't know, you know.
yeah.
So
And I
yeah.
think, as a writer, or as the writer of this, and because I've been trained as a social scientist, and one establishes one's facts, and wasn't one doesn't go too far beyond that. I felt in many ways constrained in a way that maybe some biographers don't.
Mhm.
I didn't want to speculate beyond too much beyond what I had. Whereas I think if you're not quite as embedded um, in the methodology of the social sciences, maybe you can let your mind expand a little bit more. So I had to struggle with that.
Yeah, and that is one thing that I really noted about the book too, as I was reading, was you kept very objective dialogue. You didn't insert biases or anything like that, and I really appreciated that, just reading it and being able to like make my own conclusions about this woman. That was really really awesome. So
Well, thank you. A
because you're
number
right,
of,
some biographers make assumptions about things and
yeah.
steer
Well,
the conversation. So
a number of people have asked me, well, you spent all this time and looked into this. Did you like her? And I'm always taken a bit back. I say, well, I admired her, and I'd like to honor her. I respect her. I'm not sure I really ever got to the point where I liked her. You do build a relationship as you're writing about a person, and I would go from being annoyed with her to being angry with her to thinking she was sniveling about things, and then other times I'd think, oh wow, this is fabulous. So it was a journey. It was a journey and a relationship.
yeah, for sure. And as you mentioned before, it's so hard to know like what a person's day was like when they wrote a certain letter to somebody or they had a reaction that got recorded. It's like, maybe they just had a bad day that day, or
Exactly, yes.
maybe they stepped in a mud puddle and ruined their shoe. So they were, like you don't know. It's so hard to, yeah, it's so hard with the limited pieces that we have to make a
Mhm.
judgment call of like, do I like a person or not? Because there's just
Yeah,
so
yeah,
many people.
yeah. But I'm hoping that those who read about her will like her, and will come certainly to admire what she did.
Yeah, you've made a believer out of me for sure.
If you're ever in Mexico City, um, the a visit to uh, Casa Alvarado, where she lived from 1902 to when she died in 1933, is well worth the trip. It's in Coyoacan. It's now the headquarters of the Fonoteca Nacional, which is like a library, a national library of sounds. So
Ooh,
whether it's people singing or giving a talk, or bird sounds, or what whales sound like, I guess. And I mean, their job is to capture that and preserve it. It's in Casa Alvarado. They've done a beautiful, beautiful job of um, rehabilitating it. It is beautiful. The colors, it's kind of a burnt orange and a gold, kind of yellow. It's just gorgeous. So it's very much worth a trip to visit if you happen to be in Mexico City and have a couple of hours. It's
yeah,
wonderful. And for those who know Mexico, it's also the house where Octavio Paz, who was a great Mexican writer and historian and philosopher, where he died. So where he lived before he died. So there's there are ghosts wandering around amongst the arches of her Mexican palace that are interesting.
that is very exciting. That would be an interesting story all by itself. Just like
Mm.
write a book on that house and like the ghosts, as you said, that wander the halls. That would
Right.
be really cool. That would be fascinating.
She actually tried to sell the house to Harvard and to the University of New Mexico and possibly other places, because she was deeply in debt when she died. She wanted to establish it as a center for ancient Mexican studies, and she wanted to leave her library and her artifacts to it. Unfortunately, even though there was a bit of interest, the depression intervened and nobody had the money to move. No, but no, the institutions didn't weren't in the market for
Yeah,
expanding at the time. So it's too bad, but it,
yeah,
the house does have a noble purpose now and has over the years.
yeah. So what happened to all the artifacts and everything? Are they still there? Did they
Um,
get broken up and sold, or
um,
do we know?
the house was rented out to two families, successively to two families, and um, a, a, much of her stuff, some of her stuff was given away to libraries. Uh, some of her stuff was, there was a like an estate sale, and people picked up things for nothing.
Mm,
Um,
that
and,
hurts.
yeah, and then there was a lot of stuff that just ended up being burned in the backyard. And I imagine that's most of her papers and letters and things like that. Because people moved in, it was kind of it was a jumble. It was, had fallen into disrepair by the time she died. And so it's like, cleaning out your grandmother's garage. A lot of stuff just got burned, or destroyed
Mm.
one way or thrown away. Um, what's left in the garden, there are some um, uh, statues and things that I presume are ancient. There's a wonderful stone that has Quetzalcoatl on it, and that you know kind of makes it real. So
Yeah.
that's all that's left, really.
Wow. Wow. So, looking back on everything that you have learned and discovered about her, what really excited you the most about her story in particular?
Well, I have to go back to saying it was the times in which she lived. It was just an extraordinary time of change in the United States, in Mexico, in Europe, late 19th century, early 20th century. You know, colonization and imperialism and Darwin and the expansion of education. And I mean, you could just go on and on and on. Revolutions. So I think, showing how she both helped shape some of those times and was shaped
Mhm.
by them. That to me was the most fascinating part of it.
Yeah.
So I need to find another Zelia, I guess, to
That was going to be my next question.
yeah, to
Where do you
excavate.
go from here? Are you planning to
Well,
write another book? Was this kind of like a hobby project, or
I mean, well, it
um
was a hobby project, and thank God I had it because it spanned COVID, and here you are stuck at home, and it's something to do.
yeah.
Um, I actually, um, I'm not sure whether to admit this. I've been working on a novel since then. About academic life, in part because I got interested in the development of anthropology as a discipline. But um, my husband been after me for a while to try writing fiction. I don't know, I could never do that. And but he said, "But what do you know? And you should try it." And I got to think, well, what do I know? I know about academic politics, and I know about academic life. So I'm in the midst of trying my hand at writing a novel about an anthropology department and somebody trying to get tenure in the department. So
Ooh.
in the midst of the decline of the humanities and the economic crunch and the rise of STEM and things like that. So we'll
Wow.
see. We'll see.
I'm sold. I want to read it. This is every reason why, maybe not every reason why, but these are a lot of reasons why, SASA is so amazing and why I'm so happy to be part of SASA.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm an author, a fiction author myself. So just the combination of both of those passions into a book sounds amazing. I want to read it.
well, as you grow older, perhaps you'll come to where I am, which is an awful lot of life is keeping busy, keeping yourself doing something. So anyway, I've tremendously enjoyed talking with you. And once again, let me say how honored I am and how much I respect the job that SASA has set out for itself.
I have really enjoyed our discussion as well and delving into this amazing woman. For everybody who has been watching, are there any questions that anybody wants to ask um, about Zelia? Any questions for Dr. Grindle about anything? Yeah, sometimes we get a lot of questions and sometimes we don't, but it has just been amazing
Well,
just about
if
this.
if anyone wants to follow up, feel free to share my email. And
Okay.
I'm very interested in, since the book is so new, in hearing feedback about it.
Yeah. um so how has that publication process been for you? Just, because I write fiction, so how does the academic publishing, how has that been, just for curiosity's sake?
Okay. This was the first. I've written a number of academic books, which have a very different um, kind of progression. They get sent out to experts, and experts say, "Well, yeah, this, do this or that, and then publish it." It's the idea that if you can sell 2,000 copies, that's a big deal. This was meant from the beginning to be a more general kind of publication, but in the market they call it the mass market,
Hmm.
and it was meant to be read by interested, educated people who might just be interested in something. They don't have to be anthropologists or political scientists or whatever in order to get into it. So the process of writing was fun because it was outside the constraints of academic writing. What I had to have for the first time, I had to have an agent. Which this it was sent out to a number of um, commercial publishers. It ended up being published by Harvard University Press, but as a commercial um, publication. So it was sent out, but if you go on the websites for these different publishers, they say, we don't want to hear from you. We want to hear from your agent. So I had to
Yeah.
find an agent, and that was interesting. My agent really did guide me a lot in terms of um, how to put her life into an interesting what we thought was an interesting perspective. And then COVID, and then it wasn't clear what the market. Nobody knew whether people were just going to stop reading and only watch Netflix. Nobody knew what was happening to books. Certainly in the early days of COVID, because everything just stopped. So it wasn't clear whether the publishers were going to be publishing a lot or a little. And so it got caught up in that. And then it went to an editor who was not a copy editor, but a very serious editor. And that took a considerable amount of time. Once again, very professionally done, very, very helpful to the final product, but it took time.
Hmm.
So, what I would have wanted would have been a book that came out a year ago, but you know, one thing one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
So it was a different process, and a longer process. In some ways, I think I felt more emotionally engaged or involved than I did with my academic books because I felt I was putting it out there
Mhm.
to a larger audience. So that, that has its ups and downs, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That is fascinating. And I mean, I have Google searched names that I've come across in books and just topics of interest, and found all kinds of historical figures that I'd never heard of, and bought books about them. So I hope that this one gains some popularity, for just being a discussion about a remarkable historical woman figure that
Yeah.
definitely needs more attention for sure. So I anticipate this book being a go-to for women's history. I really hope so.
Well, thank you very much. I at the beginning, my editor said, Merilee, forgotten women, been there, done that. The market is no longer interested in. I mean, that was one of the things. What I've found interesting as it's been read by people, either in manuscript form or as the book, is that what people find really interesting is that she was a woman and she was a very prominent woman. So it's interesting.
And she was a trailblazer for the discipline of anthropology.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. So yeah, definitely a woman that needs her own book for sure. Yeah,
Well, we will see. But anyway, it was in the end it was a great experience and a deep and learning experience. So,
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for discussing your book with us. I'm going to put up the QR code one more time for our watchers. You can go to this QR code and learn more about the book and buy the book. It's an amazing read if you are interested in historical women figures and trailblazers for you know things that we still love and appreciate in 2023. I highly recommend reading this book. It is fascinating.
thank you
And
very much.
this is our book club link for some of our other books that we have discussed during our live streams as well. In the Shadow of Quetzalcoatl will be available on this link as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Grindle. It has been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much, MJ, and please call me Merilee.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and
Thank you.
I send greetings to your wonderful membership.
Thank you so much. All right. Take care, Merilee.
Take care. Thank you.